Coming to you live from the heartland, it's the Conservative Neighbor.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Hi, this is Jim, your Conservative Neighbor. We've got some big news today. The Liberal Alliance Against Conservatives is crumbling. We've got an amazing medical breakthrough and a pardon that's long overdue. We'll be right back after these messages. And we are back. This is Jim, your Conservative Neighbor. Now, we have got a big thing that came out of the White House today, and that is that the president has once again saved the day and eliminated one more bit of Obama's reign of terror from history as much as you can. And he gave a pardon to some ranchers out in Oregon, and you may have heard of them. They're the Hammonds, and it led to an armed standoff against the Obama regime for unconstitutional acts. Namely, the reason that this whole thing was sparked was the complete obliteration of the Fifth Amendment by the Obama regime. They actually threw a father and son in prison for a second time on the same crime. Now, that is blatantly against the Fifth Amendment and the portion of the Fifth Amendment that says that, nor shall a person be subject to the same offense or twice be put in jeopardy of life or limb, nor shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself, nor to be deprived of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor shall private property be taken for public use without just compensation. Now, it's very clear there. Now, what happened in the Hammond case is just about every bit of that was used against them. Their Fifth Amendment's rights were destroyed when they were not given their freedom after their initial conviction. They were in fact thrown in jail for the same thing twice. Now, what this led to was a standoff, a peaceful standoff at the Malheur National Wildlife Refuge near the Hammond Ranch. They went there to complain that the Hammonds were victims of federal overreach, which they very, very much were. It's just insane. The way everything went down, the governor in Oregon was very much against the Constitution, and if you were to follow her record, you would see that she's very much against the Constitution. There was a murder, an assassination, if you will, of a man during this occupation that ultimately led to the end of it, and his name was Lavoy Finicum. Now, Lavoy was on the way to go meet with a sheriff regarding the standoff, regarding a peaceful end to it. He was assassinated along the way. The FBI and the Oregon State troopers set up an illegal roadblock, and you can watch the video of it, and then you can go look up the law for roadblocks in Oregon. And the way the roadblock is set up is clearly illegal, and it was intended that way, and it was set up around a blind curve to cause them, well, to lose control, and then they used that as an excuse to assassinate a man that was very much a good American, probably better than most people that have ever lived. Because of that, he's dead. The Hammonds spent more time in prison than they should have, and Trump has made that as much right as he can. Now, in related news to that, Lavoy Finicum was the real hands up, don't shoot. Now, Michael Brown out in St. Louis or Ferguson was not hands up, don't shoot. He was hands up, I'm about to charge you, and got shot for his trouble. But Lavoy Finicum was literally with his hands up, was shot in the side, several times in the torso. Then the final fatal blow was to his head. There's an investigation going on in the FBI about this, but now the good thing about that, or what good can come out of this rather, is that there's a massive lawsuit right now by his widow because of this peaceful standoff that ended up in the assassination of a good American rancher. It's a tragedy. It's a tragedy that it ended like that. But at least there's a pardon for the family that began the whole thing. Hopefully, well, we can all hope that because American lives were lost at the hands of, well, federal forces, they really were. Obama regime ordered federal forces who put up an illegal roadblock. And if you watch the video, and you can see the video on o4anews.com, If you were to watch the video of it, which is included in the article about this, you will straight up see a government assassination of a man. And you can see that his hands were clearly up. But this is what we got with the Obama regime. Now, one thing we should all be grateful for is that we didn't get Hillary for president, because as bad as Obama was assassinating good American Constitution-loving ranchers, as bad as that was, and as bad as it was that they threw in people in prison for helping this standoff. And by the way, the only ones that have been imprisoned because of the standoff at the refuge in Oregon, turns out they were federal informants. Literally every single one of them. Go look up the standoff and the Bundys and all of that information, and you will see the only people that have ended up in prison over this entire affair were the informants that were trying to get the patriots to do something crazy, and they never did. And because of that, some of them are in there for inciting, and that's literally what they were doing. They were attempting to incite the peaceful occupiers into doing illegal things, and it never happened. We can only hope the lawsuit goes well, that Obama is one of the litigants in it, that he is found guilty and has to pay up whatever it is he's supposed to pay up. But justice must be served, and let's hope it continues happening in the Trump administration. We'll be right back after this. We have returned, and you are still with us. That's fantastic. Now, we were talking earlier about this. It's an incredible medical breakthrough. I mean, one so incredible that we could actually be looking at the end of heart disease as we know it, and quite possibly the end of terminal heart disease entirely. It's an amazing thing, and science, medical science is incredible. It's incredible. It saves lives every day. Yes, we do have pharmaceutical companies that seem like they don't want to cure anything and put out drugs with more side effects than what they're treating. And that's obviously a problem. I mean, let's face it, when you're listening to a drug commercial and you hear more side effects than you hear symptoms that it's supposed to treat, we have a problem. But the number one killer in the world right now, more so than any war, than cancer, anything else that's going on right now, the number one killer is cardiovascular disease. It is number one. 17.7 million people died from cardiovascular diseases in 2015. That's 31% of all global deaths for that year. That's 1 out of 3 people that died possibly could have survived if medical technology had been available that could have saved them. I mean, we're talking about your heart. It's a muscle. You'd think you could do things to strengthen it, and you can do some things, but the fact is, heart disease is the number one killer on earth by a huge margin right now. And of course, it's caused by a lot of different things, tobacco and bad diets leading to obesity and just lack of physical activity and being a booze hound or doing too much meth. I mean, basically just abusing yourself is going to increase your odds of cardiovascular problems at some point in your life. Just when you think that they're not going to be able to cure things, just when you think that all they're trying to do is just treat the symptoms and not cure a problem, out comes some news from Boston Children's Hospital, and that's where they're doing research, and it's incredible. They're taking part of your body's muscle from your abdomen, about the size of a pencil eraser, and they blend this up and put it in a centrifuge, and they get something out of it, out of your own muscle tissue. We're talking like the size of a pencil eraser, taken out of your own stomach, and it contains 30 billion mitochondria. Now, I don't know exactly what those are. I know that apparently your body has them. But what I do know, and that's at least from reading this report, they have injected these mitochondria taken from an abdominal muscle cell, injected them into injured heart cells, into the part where your heart is dead, and it has revived it. They've only done this on infants that were in the hospital in basically terminal care because of heart defects, but they were able to take these children and heal them. Not all of them were 100%. The ones that didn't survive were basically the ones that were so far gone that there was nothing they could do. But the fact is that they cured most of them. The things that they say that they could do with this is that they can move it on to adults as well, using the same thing. Whereas somebody or yourself that's had a heart attack and has damaged heart muscles. They're talking about being able to take your own mitochondria right out of your own muscle tissue, inject it into a blood vessel near your heart that leads into your heart, a vein, and these things magically go to where they need to be to repair muscle. I mean, it almost sounds like magic, but we really could be looking at the end of heart disease. Now, they caution that tissue that's too damaged or has been severely damaged for too long, this treatment doesn't help on. But while we may not be able to save every person currently alive with heart disease, if this research does exactly as what they hope it does, anybody that gets any heart disease, any baby that's born with a heart issue, can simply get an injection of their own tissue, their own mitochondria, and cure the disease that they were born with and or that's killing them. That's amazing. And how in the world they figured this out, I have no idea. I know this much. I'm not a scientist. When they come up with cool things like this, I'm just glad that I am alive, at the time that I am. And you should be thankful too, because the average human lifespan throughout history until the 20th century rolled around was, get this, 35 years. We're talking all through history, 35 years. So if you've made it longer than 35 years, then you need to count yourself lucky because you've beaten the historic average for life. Every minute you get after the age of 35 is a blessing. So remember that. We'll be right back after this. It has finally happened. It has finally happened. The Democrat alliance against conservatives is beginning to burst at the seams. This happened in London, and it'll no doubt reflect over here. In fact, I know for a fact it's reflected over here because I read a lot of news. And feminists, the diehard, bra-burning, the type feminists that held protests back in the 60s, well, they're none too pleased with the overall LGBT movement because of transgenders. It totally, the idea that somebody can be whatever gender their imagination says and not what their biology says, well, completely wipes out the idea of lesbian rights or whatever they want to call it. But it was bound to happen, and it finally has. Conservatives have long predicted that feminism and transgenderism were ultimately incompatible, and for a long time, their mutual hatred of conservatives held them together. Well, that time is no more. And that movement, their collectiveness in their hatred for the right, it burst open as lesbians led the parade in attacking transgenderism with this banner. And it's a good-sized banner, and you can't miss it. It says, "Trans activism erases lesbians." And if you think about it, it kind of does. If your gender comes completely from your imagination, well, that goes against the whole LGBT thing, because it shouldn't just be LGB, because lesbian, gay, and bisexual kind of indicates that there's only two genders, but then they throw in the transgender and the XYZ along with it, and nobody knows exactly what it is. But what it is doing is it's destroying the feminist movement. And you may wonder, well, how could transgenders destroy the feminist movement? It was real simple. Sports. Go look up transgenders in sports. And you're going to hear all sorts of cases, and mostly through high schools, junior highs, and things like that, where a so-called transgender female, which is just a boy who says he's a girl or believes he's a girl but isn't really a girl, suddenly decides that they want to participate in girls' sports. So they simply say, well, I identify as female, so I should be able to participate in these sports. Well, that's great and all, except for now you've just taken all of the progress that women have made and thrown it right out the window for your imaginary gender. I mean, it's ridiculous. You have just taken the entire feminist movement from voting on up and just thrown it right out the window because the two ideas cannot coexist. So what you end up having are a bunch of girly men participating in girls' sports. And of course, they're going to win. It is not sexist to say that men are more athletically built. We're stronger, we're faster, and we're generally built for combat, because that's our role in our gender, is to protect women and children. And so what you've got now is you've got a bunch of boys saying that they're girls, joining up with girls' sports, and then just stomping mud holes in them. So yeah, the feminists are upset because finally the WNBA exists. And, it's all full of lesbians. It's so full of lesbians, in fact, that the few heterosexual players are quitting in droves, and you can look that up too. They're quitting in droves because of hatred of heterosexuals by the lesbian players in the NBA. But hey, they got their place. The lesbians, the women, they finally got their sports. They've got sports in every college. They've got professional sports now. But now women are having all of their advances be erased by a guy who couldn't compete and couldn't win in men's athletics. And so instead, he just has to say, hey, I am a woman and you have to accept me for that. And now I'm going to get a state championship or a gold medal in women's track or some women's sport because I couldn't do it as a guy. And so now I'm just magically a girl. And that's the truth of the whole transgender thing. It's all imagination. If your imagination is the only thing that says that you are something, congratulations, you are mentally ill. We'll be right back. We have returned. Now, I think you can tell that after listening to the last 3 segments that we have a lot of work to do in this country. First thing we have to do is to make sure that Democrats are basically driven out of office in every office that they inhabit or that they control. We have to do it for the sake of this nation. I mean, women's sports aren't even women's sports anymore because of Democrats and their crazy, crazy beliefs. A president has to come along years later and pardon a rancher who did nothing wrong and ended up, with a good American killed. We have to have our president come along and pardon the survivors because of the feckless Obama regime. Democrats still look at this horrible president. I mean, he makes Jimmy Carter seem like the best president ever. And up until Obama came along, Jimmy Carter was hands down known as the worst president in history. But then Obama comes along and screws things up, just turns this whole nation on its side. Here we are, more divided than we ever were as a nation. The damage done by his regime must be undone. The only way we can do that is to turn Democrats away at every turn, at every election. We have to say no to their agenda. We have to get involved with the school boards. We even have to get up on overpasses with flags and signs supporting things that are anti-Democrat or pro-America. But we've got to get out and support our country. Just grab a flag and some friends and go to an overpass with a sidewalk on it and stand there for an hour and just wave. You'll be amazed how many people love you and honk back at you. It's just, it's a great time to be alive, so don't blow it. Do the right thing for the right reasons. God bless you, and God bless America.
Don't label us left or right. Our American. Not looking for a war, but we came to fight. Our American. Somebody's gotta stand up. Stand up. Somebody's gotta do what's right. We're rising cause we're fed up. Got our house in order and got yours inside.